This guy at his peak did some things statistically that were just incredible. Just 5 years ago, he was averaging 27 and 11, 5 assists per game, and shooting 36% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. That's something that statistically Anthony Davis has never done, and Joel Embiid is doing this season, and he is at worst top 2 in the MVP conversation right now. But then shortly after that, he basically disappeared from the NBA and has been on 4 different teams in 2 seasons. DeMarcus Cousins has had an incredible, sometimes tragic, but overall unbelievable career so far in the NBA. And I want to start by going back to the draft, the 2010 draft. And he was arguably one of the best big man draft prospects of the last 10 to 15 years. He was talent-wise and on the floor an incredible player. He was bruising, he had great skill, he was weirdly agile for his size, and had plenty of team success as well. Him and John Wall and those Kentucky teams were very, very good. And if you only paid attention to his skill on the basketball court, none of the extracurricular stuff on the court or some of the personality issues, things like that, if you just looked at DeMarcus Cousins as a basketball player from a skill set, size, profile perspective, he arguably could have been the first pick in this draft, and he ends up going 5th. And the reason being is pretty obvious, right? There were a lot of concerns about him just being a head case, a personality that was just not going to fit at the NBA level, immature, having a ton of issues with technical fouls, and just taking himself out of a game mentally. And so now we look back on that draft. John Wall goes first, completely defensible, has had a great career, injury issues lately, but was really, really good at Washington. Wouldn't be the first pick in a redraft. Now that would be Paul George, but was a very, very good player. No issue at all with John Wall as the first pick. Now, as we go the rest of the way, keep in mind, all 3 of these guys went ahead of DeMarcus Cousins, a guy that averaged at one point 27, 11, and 4. Evan Turner goes to Philadelphia, doesn't work out there, goes to Boston, works out relatively well, goes to Portland, gets a big contract, but has basically been a glorified role player for the entirety of his career. He goes second. Derek Favors at third, relatively defensible. He had a lot of potential at the time, never really developed, is just in kind of the wrong era, was never big enough to truly be a 5, would have been a really good power forward back in the day when that position actually mattered. Didn't really fall through in his potential, was a part of a big trade when Darren Williams went to, I almost said Brooklyn, went to New Jersey. 4, Wesley Johnson. This is the beyond indefensible pick ahead of DeMarcus Cousins, even at the time. Wesley Johnson was 23 as a rookie. He didn't dominate college basketball as a 22-year-old, and we've got 18 and 19-year-olds in this draft. Guys like John Wall, guys like DeMarcus Cousins, that if you get DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall 3 years in college, they'd be averaging 35 a game. They'd be incredible. But Minnesota decides, you know what, we really need a wing. We don't like this DeMarcus Cousins guy. And they end up with Wes Johnson. Again, he's 23 as a rookie. It's just basically barely a role player for most of his career. But here's the crazy thing. DeMarcus Cousins has played 30 more NBA games than Wesley Johnson. Wesley Johnson was a bad player. DeMarcus Cousins is far from it. And that feels really symbolic of the way that Cousins' career ended up. All this potential, all this promise, all this excitement, and ultimately you find yourself disappointed. By the way, this whole 2010 draft is 100% getting its own video at one point. It's unbelievable to look back at. So in that draft, Cousins ends up going 5th to the worst case scenario for him, Sacramento. Of all the places, of all the teams, of all the organizations that DeMarcus Cousins would have succeeded in, Sacramento was at the bottom of the list. They were a disaster. They are arguably still a disaster. And in 6.5 seasons in Sacramento, the best the team ever did was 33 wins and 9 games out of a playoff spot. But I want to just really quickly frame this and help you guys understand what DeMarcus Cousins was dealing with in Sacramento. I'm not trying to say that he was faultless in what was happening there. He could have been better. He could have been more mature. He certainly made plenty of mistakes. These are some of the guards that DeMarcus Cousins played with in his first couple of seasons in Sacramento. In year 1, we've got Tyreek Evans. Not bad. Some other guys to mention here. Pooh Jeter, Bino Udrich, and Marcus Thornton. We move on to year 2. They get Isaiah Thomas. That's very helpful. They get him with the last pick in the draft. Also, Jimmer Fredette shows up for whatever that's worth. Year 3, Aaron Brooks and Tony Douglas. Year 4, Ben McLemore and Grievous Vasquez. Year 5, Nick Stauskas. And year 6, the year that they won 33 games, Darren Collison and Rajon Rondo. And so I don't think it's unclear why the Sacramento DeMarcus Cousins era didn't work out particularly well. Yes, Cousins had plenty of faults as a player. He could have done a much better job maturing, but they never put something even remotely close to a competent roster, even remotely close to a legitimate pairing alongside him. They missed draft pick after draft pick. Jimmer Fredette, Nick Stauskas, I think Thomas Robinson is in here somewhere. Willie Cauley-Stein is in here. Just miss after miss after miss. Actually, hold on one second. Turn off the face cam. I can't just let half a decade of awful draft picks and roster mismanagement go? We have to dive a little deeper on this. So in 2011, they go with Jimmy Fredette, as I said, 10th overall. Immediately after that, Klay Thompson goes 11th, Kawhi goes 15th, Jimmy Butler goes 30th in one of the deepest draft classes we've ever seen, and the Kings end up with a guy that barely plays. In 2012, they go with Thomas Robinson, who was a nice college player but was mostly just a hustle power forward, and right after that pick, Dame goes 6th. In 2013, Ben McLemore goes 7th, CJ McCollum going 10th right after that. In 2014, Nick Stauskas goes 8th, Zach LaVine is picked 13th. In 2015, Willie Cauley-Stein, who plays the same position as DeMarcus Cousins, goes 6th, Miles Turner goes 11th, and Devin Booker goes 13th. It's almost impossible to be that bad at the draft. Even as crazy as the draft can be sometimes, it's almost impossible to have 5 top 10 picks in a row and not have a single one be of any consequence whatsoever. But it isn't just the draft, because sometimes they did get stuff right. They got Isaiah Thomas with the last pick in the draft, and then they traded him away in 2014 for nothing. And then in the 2016-17 season, he made second team All-NBA. And potentially the most egregious move is yet to come. They traded away Nick Stauskas a year after picking him 8th, salaries, a future first, and a 2017 pick swap to Philadelphia to make room to sign Rajon Rondo in the summer of 2015. And that pick swap ends up becoming Jason Tatum. The Kings did get De'Aaron Fox, but they lost out on Jason Tatum so they could have salary cap space to sign Rajon Rondo. All they had to do with one of their half a decade of top 10 picks was pick a really good guard to play alongside DeMarcus Cousins. And in those drafts, there were multiple All-Star and All-NBA level guards available, and they missed every time and ultimately had to trade away valuable draft capital to sign a player in Rondo that would be a decent guard for them because they missed year after year. This is arguably the worst 5-year stretch of roster management in the last 20 to 25 years of the NBA. And it all happened while DeMarcus Cousins was there. And then there's one other point that everybody makes about DeMarcus Cousins' time in Sacramento, and it's this. There was one coach that seemed to reach DeMarcus Cousins in a different way, and a guy that Cousins respected and listened to and really felt like he was going in the right direction with. And that was Michael Malone, who's now the coach of the Denver Nuggets, is an incredible coach. That's the guy they had when they won 33 games. And they fired him after that season. And apparently that set off DeMarcus Cousins and just was the beginning of the end, basically, for his tenure there. He had 6 coaches in 6.5 seasons and ultimately ends up going to New Orleans. And this, for me, is one of the most underrated, most underappreciated, overlooked kind of time periods within the NBA, because when he goes to New Orleans gives up like Buddy Hield and a couple of other things. It wasn't a ton in exchange, and it kind of lets you know where Cousins' trade value is at. But this Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins thing, it was working. It was really fun. It took them a little bit, but they were starting to figure out how to do this Twin Towers thing. And him and Davis had the Kentucky connection, and it really felt like something was clicking there. And then DeMarcus Cousins tears his Achilles. And I think a lot of people now think about, well, New Orleans made the trade. It didn't work. It didn't really work all that well together. He tears his Achilles, Boogie ends up leaving, Anthony Davis ends up leaving, and that's the end of that era in New Orleans. That's not how it happened. It was going to work. There were real signs that they were making progress with Boogie and AD kind of alternating between who's inside and who's outside. And Boogie was a pretty good passer as well at his peak. I think that was going to work. And if it does, there's a world in which if DeMarcus Cousins doesn't get hurt and they re-sign him, there's a world in which Anthony Davis never goes to LA. And what does that mean for the Lakers? What does that mean for LeBron? What does that mean for the Pelicans right now? It changes 1,000 different things if Boogie never gets hurt. But of course, he does. And that is just one example of 2 incredible moments that DeMarcus Cousins is a part of. 2 of the craziest what just happened moments of the last 10 to 15 years in the league, DeMarcus Cousins is involved in. The first is the initial trade to New Orleans. Nobody really saw that coming. It felt like Boogie could get traded, but not for what he got traded for. Then the other, and I vividly remember this one, was when he announced he was going to sign with Golden State. So this is like peak Golden State Warriors. Boogie is a free agent with an Achilles tear, and nobody really knows what he's going to sign for. But we at least expected he's going to get a 1-year deal, 10 a year, something like that. He signs the mid-level exception to go to Golden State, which, I mean, this is like peak of their powers, Golden State. And everybody thinks the league is over. Everybody thinks, well, let's just not even play. Let's just not even run the season. If they have DeMarcus Cousins as well, the one weak spot for those Warriors teams was needing a 5-man. And if he was able to get healthy and play really well for them, there was just no way anybody was going to be able to beat them. And again, it comes back to this theme for Cousins' career. We all got excited. It was a huge deal. And then ultimately, that era in Golden State meant nothing. He really didn't contribute in any kind of meaningful way. He wasn't able to guard. And granted, he had multiple, leg issues, not just the Achilles. He hurt his quad. There's a ton of different stuff going on there with Boogie. And that kind of plays into this, well, he just disappeared for a couple of years thing. And it's just crazy to look back. Someone's going to look back on this career in 10 to 20 years and be like, they're going to need a video like this, or someone else is going to make another one just to explain what in the world happened with DeMarcus Cousins' career, which brings us to where he is now. Bounced around to the Clippers, Milwaukee, and now he finds himself in Denver, where he's actually found himself a little bit of a role. But if you played DeMarcus Cousins' career 10, 15, 20 times, I can't imagine there's many ways that it ends up worse than this. I think there would have been a team out there somewhere within the top 10 that if DeMarcus Cousins had gone anywhere but Sacramento, his career would have gone much better. And I think he found a spot where he was really going to start to fit, really start contributing to a winning team in New Orleans, and then he gets hurt. And then he goes to Golden State because he wants to win a title and he wants to be part of something special, and he gets hurt. And it's just time after time after time, disappointment. And it's an incredible career to look back on, and it's one that honestly makes me sad. I wish we could have seen more out of DeMarcus Cousins at the top level that he showed us at certain points in his career. That's the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like rating on it. My name is Tucker, and I'll see you all next time.